Welcome to the Monday, July 20 meeting of the Newcastle Environmental Review Board. Looks like present we have David Horowitz, Ivan Alter, myself, John Rosenblum, and Dennis Corelli is, as previously stated, online, audio only. So, looks like we've got 4 other parties also joining. Would you like to identify yourselves? Looks like Mr. Kurth.
Yes, contrary to what the screen says, it's Peter Kurth. I'm using my wife's computer.
I took a leap and kind of assumed that.
I'm with Peter. I'm Aaron Park.
Okay.
My name is Peter Akchar. This is my wife, Bryn Akchar.
Hi.
Okay. And are you neighbors or?
I'm a neighbor to Mr. Hoey and Mrs. Hoey.
Okay. Mr. Hoey, I see you.
My name is Terrence Hoy. I'm here representing myself and my wife, Susanna Parry Hoy. We're located at 15 Campfire Road.
Okay. And then last but not least, the gentleman up in the top right for me, Paul.
Paul Janig. I'm with Peter and Aaron.
Okay. Terrific. Okay, I think the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from April 20. I don't know whether David or Ivan, you had a chance to go over them and have any questions or comments. I went over them, unfortunately, just today, and I'm out of town, so didn't have a means to mark up or compile get the markup to anybody. But my comments were non-substantial, mostly grammatical, clarifying who said what, things like that. So, did you guys?
I didn't have any further comments, John.
I'm sorry?
I did not have any further comments.
Okay.
Neither did I, Jonathan.
Okay. Then I'll take the liberty of sending Dennis my markup sometime toward the end of the week or when I get back, and that can be incorporated. But as I say, I'm representing to everybody that there's nothing substantive in the changes, and they're mostly typos and the like. So with that being understood, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is a tree removal application at Hardscrabble Road. And what I'm going to ask Dennis to do on both of the applications that are on for tonight, since there has been previous involvement with town, with Dennis and town building department officials with the work that's already taken place at both of these sites, I'm going to ask Dennis, as we introduce each item, to give the board a little bit of background as to what's happened, what's occurred to date, and how these items came to be on the agenda tonight. So Dennis, if you would introduce us to the 1112 Hardscrabble Road application, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'm off mute. Yes, so for me, I was, this was, for my records, March 11th of this year. I was on Hardscrabble Road looking at tree removals that were performed in the town right of way on a bedrock outcrop area. And I guess one of the neighbors had just come out characteristics that being the town car, the vest, etc. And as we were ending our conversation, she just mentioned to me, "Oh, and I'm just curious, what's going on in 1112 Hardscrabble?" And I said, "I'm not aware of anything." And she said, "Oh, I heard a lot of chainsaws, and I think trees came down." So I just drove by the residence and saw some piles of cut logs from the roadway, not really allowed to enter the property at that point. No work was ongoing at that moment. I just saw kind of just what were conditions at the time. I had sent a letter to the Akars and Ms. McGrath here officially on our, as it was recorded on our records, just inquiring if any work had occurred, and that we do regulate trees per Chapter 121. And so they responded to me, and at the time, for our region of the country, COVID crisis, since they are both in the medical field, they said that they would be able to get back to me at some point with respect to the work that was performed, because I wanted some just detailed information about that, which they did. Looks like it was performed by him and his landscaping, and they gave me permission to inspect the property, which I did with that work proposal, which had already occurred in hand. I got to meet Mr. Akbar's father, who was actively doing, I would say, cleanup and segregating work on the property, because the trees removed were of various conditions, and as a result, not all the wood could be stacked, beneficially reused. Some of it would have to be disposed of, other brush. So when I inquired as to what the plan was for the area, he had mentioned his agricultural background and, was looking to do something similar with respect to the property. So I said, okay, if possible, can I at least just get a plan as to, what you're looking to plant, where you're looking to plant it, and, what you had as a vision, because I'm getting inquiries from other people that, typically in Newcastle, when there's a clearing of trees, it usually doesn't, become a garden or an orchard or something. Something's usually proposed to be built. So I received that plan, and I suggested at that time that they apply for a tree removal permit with the trees that were included on the list. I determined that 26 of them should have been included in that application. The other trees were either in condition that would be dead or hazardous, or were below 8 inches in diameter and therefore not be included on that application. And when they sent that application as part of the notification of neighbors, I suggested that they also send a copy of that plan. And that's what they did. And at this point, I know Mr. Hoey wanted a chance to comment, and per Chapter 121, there is an appeal part of the code where you could appeal to the ERB, and that's basically the stage we're at now.
Okay, so Dennis, just to be clear, exactly how many trees of what kind were cleared, and how big of an area in the property was it?
I don't have an answer to the area of the property in terms of a numeric response, but I do have the trees that were included. There were 26, as I mentioned, and I decided 24 required replacement. And I believe I think I gave you the total list, but I didn't give you as I'm looking at it now, I don't believe I gave you my handwritten markup where I started crossing out which trees wouldn't count and which trees were subject to replacement. Oh, no, I thought I did. I believe it was the last page of the submittal. You'll see the list, and there's crossouts of some of the trees
Are you,
in
are you
hand.
talking about the tree? Are you talking about the tree work proposal from Jimenez Landscaping that identifies a whole bunch of trees?
It does. And then there was a page which I thought I included.
The third to the last sheet has a handwritten plot plan.
Right. And then is there any sheet which basically is the Jimenez Landscaping proposal, which has my hand crossouts of trees that and/or shrubs that were not included?
No.
I don't
Not
see-
that I can see.
Okay. So what I did was then, which I can make available, apologies, was I took the Jimenez Landscaping sheet and basically whittled down the list as to why I came up with the 26. So for example, when you see dead, that was not included. When you see burning bush, that's a shrub, not regulated. Rhododendron, I consider that a shrub, not regulated. 4-inch maple, below 8 inches, 6-inch maple, below 8 inches. So that, you know, not specific list, but that indicates the process by which I was removing some of those trees and/or shrubs from the list that you see.
When did this work get started?
I'm not sure of that, how to answer that question, because when I saw it, the trees were pretty much felled at that point. And it was just a cleanup operation that I believe was being conducted entirely by Mr. Akgar.
So I would have to look up the exact date, to be honest with you. I don't know offhand the first day it started, but it was sometime in February, if you had come in March.
Okay, thank you.
Ultimately, Dennis, you determined that there were 24 trees that required replacement?
Yes.
Is there besides this hand sketch, a property survey that shows, you know, the house, the boundaries? Are there any other issues on the site? Any wetlands or slopes or anything else, Dennis?
No to wetlands. And typically for tree removals, when we issue a permit, we don't require a survey. We put that responsibility in the language of the permit as the conditions onto the applicant, that the trees need to be located on your property.
Well, I ask only because of the quantity that is being discussed here. Is it even possible to make that replacement? And is there any ratio, given the nature of this, that relates to how many tree replacements would be required to create that replacement quantity?
Sure. Well, what I determined based on our code and percentages of diameter, so it's 25%, you know, less than 18, and then 50% at 18 and above. The replacement came out to 58 trees that would need to be replanted. And that hand sketch proposal had included 78 trees to be planted from 4 different genus, and 40 shrubs just from 1 species, but we do allow 8 shrubs to equal 1 tree. So at that ratio, that was another 5 trees. So the proposed replacement included 83 trees.
So your conclusion is that what is proposed is greater than what's actually required under the ordinance? Is that fair to say?
It is in terms of numbers. There are some inconsistencies with respect to how the code is written, which, in my opinion, is more of a, I think the term that I used with Dr. Akar was of an ecological replacement plan, where you're concerned with distributions of multiple species and percentage distribution of overstory and understory species. And from reading that plan, from reading the code, and from, you know, spending time with the tree removal application process now for over a year, I suspect strongly that the inspiration for that code was to prevent someone from taking down a bunch of trees of different sizes, different species, etc., and then just replacing a nice long row of arborvitaes along their property line, or along their pool, or along a fence line, and, you know, trying to earn the replacement credit 1-to-1 per tree. Since this had, obviously, within the entirety of the plan, there are some, I'll call non-orchard, non-agricultural species that are being proposed, namely the 16 maples. But the remainder of the trees, to me, had the ability to at least produce some sort of produce, and therefore I, you know, was considering it sort of under a different lens with respect to the over replacement, and not necessarily looking to adhere to that strict plan that is included specifically, as I think I wrote on the agenda, for 121.6D, E, and F.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, since the applicant is with us at this point, why don't we hear from them in terms of exactly what the project has included, what's taken place thus far, and what's in your guys' mind in terms of what's being proposed for the property.
Sure.
Isn't public comment supposed to go first in such an environment?
I don't know that there's any magic to it, to tell you the truth, but why don't we find out exactly what the applicant is proposing first, so that we have a context for what your comment might be, Mr. Hoey.
Roger that, thank you.
So as you can kind of see on the plan there, we propose to basically make a very large garden with multiple beds. We grew up on a farm, so kind of just trying to reiterate that here. You know, I do apologize that this is an after-the-fact situation. You know, we are looking to do mostly something, as Dennis had said, that's going to produce some type of either fruit or vegetables. And, you know, we did not clear the land to make a lawn. And just to have free space, we just want to have it basically make it into something that's going to benefit our family and what we thought was going to be the land as well, which is why we had diversified it so much. And I'm sure things will be added even on top of that. As of right now, the trees have been cut. It is a little bit of a slow process because my dad and I do most of the work. So every day we're moving logs, splitting them, as of right now, pretty much the entire area is cleared. We're going to be just working on trying to just form some type of beds for the gardens and then working from there. Most planting is not going to happen right now because of the weather. So hopefully by fall, we'll be able to start planting some of these. Also trying to tackle that we have 9 or 10 deer that live in our property. So we're trying to making sure that we have the appropriate gear to keep our trees safe and things like that. Just pretty much where we are right now.
So do I take it that there's no work going on the property at this point other than clearing
Yeah, all we're doing is,
the wood from the trees that have already been felled?
that's correct.
Okay. And you don't plan on undertaking any further work until the application process has been completed and we've got a plan?
Correct. I was told I can continue just clearing, and that's all we've been doing thus far.
Right. Okay. Do you have an idea as to the extent, the total area of the property? I mean, number one, how big is your property? Because we, again, as David noted, we don't have a site plan here. How big is your property total, and how much of an area is subject to these clearing activities, and where is it located on the property?
So
Neighbors vis-a-vis the road.
sure. So our entire property is 7.58 acres. It's located, the main house is, we can say, is the center. We have an old stone carriage house towards the road on the left-hand side. Behind that is a pool with a pool house and a greenhouse. And then there's a hill, and that hill is where we had cleared the trees. And that's where our power lines run through as well. So they run from the road behind our pool. So all the trees that were cut, the pool's here, all the trees were lined up right here. And then we own more property on top.
And do you have an idea as to the total area that may have been cleared?
Honestly, this is a really rough guess. I would say maybe a half acre.
Okay. And how close is that area to your neighbors?
So the closest neighbor would probably be 1100 Hardscrabble Road, who's just adjacent to us. And property line wise, from looking at the survey that we had gotten when we had bought the property, there's a decent barrier. I mean, there's probably like 200 feet between that.
Okay.
And then everyone else, I mean, that would be the only neighbor that's close to the work. I know Terrence is above, but we own quite a bit of land on top, and we didn't really touch any trees up there. If anything, that's where we put some of the dead trees up there and branches and stuff like that.
Okay. So before we hear from Mr. Hoy, David, Ivan, you have any additional questions for the applicant about what's been going on, what's proposed?
Not yet.
Right. Not yet. That's right.
Okay, Mr. Hoy, the floor is yours. We can't hear you. You've got it here.
You're on mute.
Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry about
There
that.
you go.
There you go.
So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because some of the things that were just indicated are not true. So I just got a couple things to say, and then perhaps we can have a discussion. We are deeply concerned with the potential environmental impact of the unlawful tree work that has gone on at it looks like Hardscrabble Road area. I'm not sure who owns the two properties up there. For as much as 2 months, we had almost dawn to dusk chainsaws that resulted in a clear cutting of a large portion of that property, which I think has not been represented properly here tonight. To date, we are concerned that our neighbor is not taking this violation as seriously as it truly is, as evidenced by this drawing that we received, not prepared by a landscape architect or anyone who has any knowledge with respect to local law. In addition to that, what they've submitted is not in compliance with 121-6. Dennis did indicate just a few moments ago that in the spirit of the law, planting X amount of fruit trees doesn't make up for the clear cutting of these mature hardwoods that were taken down. With respect to the environment, we do know that the game trail that came through my property has been damaged because of the work that's been done up there. Much of the brush was piled. Now the game trail has moved. We're also very concerned about some of the hawks that reside in those trees. I'm looking out my window right now. I can literally see the clear cut area from where I'm sitting right now in my house. So what I would ask is that the Environmental Review Board take this very seriously and perhaps help my neighbor with hiring a landscape architect, looking at the law, and putting together some type of remediation package that will right this wrong. Clear cutting a property, that's not, you can't do that around here. I certainly couldn't do it. Every time I do any work on my property, I am obligated as a good citizen and a resident here in Newcastle, put in a permit and find out what the limits are. And that is what I have always done. I would expect that from anyone living around here. But I am very concerned about the environmental damage that has been done. It's present here right now. We've seen the effect. And again, this work went on for a very long time. Unabated. Many people saw it. You could see it from the road, and I can see it from my house right now. Representing that it's several hundred feet away from my property, it's not true. It's literally up to my property line and affecting the game trails and our line of sight. So that's not entirely true. I'm surprised that there is no survey in front of us here tonight because I think the lines could easily be seen. And I'm also surprised that, again, that this is not being handled as seriously as it truly is. So if anyone has any questions for me, I'll greatly take those right now.
My first question, I guess, is the potential factual discrepancy as to the actual location of the area that's been cut. You say, Mr. Hoey, that you believe it's right up to the property line with your property?
No, it's not. I didn't say that. First of all the trees that fall down from this adjoining property, I always have to clean up. I do it all the time. We cut the wood, and we take care of it. For me to be sitting here right now talking about trees when at least once a year I'm cleaning up a tree that has fallen from that property onto mine is kind of ridiculous. But I digress there a little bit. I think we should have a survey in front of us. I think we should be actually looking at this, counting the stumps, seeing how close to my property the brush was piled, how it disrupted the game trails, the environmental impact. It's fairly serious. This is a big deal, cutting down this number of trees without a permit.
And honestly, that's why we're here today. We want to eradicate the problem. We're sorry that it's come to this, and we agree with what you're saying. I mean, Dennis can kind of note on this too. He was there to assessing the property, and he knows how far up we went. I mean, to my knowledge, it's not near where you are. If I had piled brush on my property and it's disturbing something, I'd be happy to move it. And to be honest with you, I've only owned the property for 3 years, so I apologize if trees on that part of the property were falling down. I'd be happy to come help cut them down. I will admit the work has been going on for a while, but again, I don't have a whole team that's doing it. A lot of it is my father and I, and it's a small working process. So I'm sorry I've not been cognizant of that, and we're here to eradicate the problem. So that's what we need to do. We're only looking to help better the land as well.
one thing that I think might be helpful, at least for me to understand the area, what's happened, would be to see a site survey or property survey that has the area impacted identified with the location of the trees that were removed. I think that would put a bit of a factual start to the conversation about what has happened and what might be needed to respond to that action.
I agree. And I also think it might be a useful idea if we all went out and took a look at the property in a socially distant way, of course. But you know, based on the size, I mean, even if it is quote unquote only half an acre, I mean, that is a significant disturbance. And given the number of trees that have come down, and I think it would help if the board took a firsthand look and was able to reach our own conclusions as to the nature of the disturbance, et cetera. Yeah, David,
Sure.
Ivan, any questions, any issues?
No, I think that's a good idea, Jonathan.
Okay.
I'm also interested in hearing from Mr. Hoy what sorts of remediation efforts would, to you, feel that they might be restorative to what's happened, so that we have a sense of you know, what your perspective on this is.
Well, that's a great question. I think rather than being in the spirit of the law, we need to be in compliance with the law. This drawing that was sent to me, again, I'm a professional. No landscape architect worked on this. There was a violation of the law. The first thing I might have done when I found myself in trouble with the township, I'd go out and find someone who can help me out of this hole. And that would be a landscape architect who knows the law, who can assist in designing a program to meet not only the spirit of the law, but the letter of the law, because what was done in that property was wrong. I see the effects of it every day. Every time we look up there, there's a huge hole in the sky now, and it's disrupted the wildlife pattern around here. And I happen to be an outdoors and a conservationist. So it worries me. We are greatly concerned over what has happened on the other side. And again, every time it's true.
I'm sorry. So it sounds like you're interested in getting some expert opinion on what sorts of remediation might be helpful to first obviously to get a clear picture of what happened and what would be needed in order to deal with that in connection with the local law, but also to get some expert opinion about what sorts of remediation might be helpful in terms of what's gone on.
Any reputable landscape architect in the area knows the local law here in Chappaqua. That person could have already helped my neighbor out, and we wouldn't even be sitting here right now, in my opinion. But that hasn't happened. This is what we received in the mail, and it's wholly inappropriate, and it's not in compliance with the law.
Well, so far, to be fair, all that is an application. And that's one of the reasons that Dennis brought it before us, and that we're considering it now, because before anything is done, there's going to be a more formal examination and a more formal rendering of whatever plan may end up being agreed to if and when a permit is issued. So I don't know that I disagree with the idea of requiring a professional landscape architect or other appropriate professional to be engaged. To some extent, I think that's implicit in the discussion that we've been having about requiring a survey that would show the area of disturbance and the area of proposed replantings. I, for one, don't disagree with the idea of engaging a professional here before we go further.
That would probably settle everything because the professional, he would look at the situation, say, this is what you have to do.
You know, the ordinance is fairly clear, but there is a lot around the edges, and there is a lot of discretion given to the town, given to Dennis, given to us in the board in interpreting that and coming up with a plan that we believe, you know, works within the letter of the ordinance and the spirit of the ordinance, and can hopefully, you know, meet the agendas and the needs of everybody legitimately involved. And that would include the applicant, that would include you as a neighbor, et cetera. So my suggestion is that at this point, we probably table this matter until such time as I'm just wondering whether we should, the chicken before the egg, whether we should go out and take a look before we require the new plan to come in, because we don't want to necessarily require the applicant to spend any more money than is absolutely necessary to do this. And perhaps if we go out and walk the property first, guys, we might have a little bit of an idea and a little bit of a direction with Dennis to send them in before the professional does some work. What do you think?
I think that would be, this is Dennis, that would be a good idea, especially since to the concerns, the day that I did do the inspection out there, there definitely were a lot of yappy hawks, and there is a stand of pines where I know that's where they like to nest, because the police called me in April about a tree that was coming down that I had to stop from coming down. Otherwise, the removal company would have violated federal law with the active nest there. So there's definitely, from this list, I feel two different components that occurred. One, many of the trees that I didn't require replacement for, there were a number of, and I guess to Mr. Ho's point, there were a number of very dead, rotted evergreens that were in what is still, I consider, to be the wooded section of the property that is up on the hill. And then as you move away from that evergreen wooded section, what is the cleared segment property of the hill where the proposed replanting is to take place. So I think for you guys to put the site into context would be very helpful before you look at any other two-dimensional or three-dimensional drawings.
Question for Dennis. In the condition of the site as it is right now, is there anything that needs to be done to stop it from eroding or maintain it in a certain way that it can be in that condition for a while?
From what I saw, the trees that were felled, all the stumps remained in place, so I wasn't immediately concerned about that. The cleanup work that they're referring to is just all the material that obviously exists as a result of branches, trunk, etc. that was on the ground. So I didn't see any evidence of that when I was there in May. And then June was kind enough to get even drier for us. So unless things have changed, I wouldn't expect to see anything different. And if no stumps were removed, presumably, as I believe Dr. Ackar said, then I think we're okay.
Okay.
So do we want to, after this meeting, circulate emails among the board, Dennis, the applicant, and see if we can come up with a date that might work for us to come by and do a site visit?
Yep, works for me. I'm here all summer.
Okay. Fortunately or unfortunately, so are we all. Okay, then why don't we do that? And we'll table it to a future meeting. And the applicant, I assume, will represent to us that no work is going to take place prior to us coming out and having further consideration, correct?
Done.
Great. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Hoy, for now, before we move on to the next matter?
No, not at all. Thank you very much, Dennis and the entire town and everyone for having me here tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. All right, so the next matter is an application on 49 Kitchel Road. Dennis, if you're ready, why don't you take us through the background on that one?
Sure. Back in January for this property, I issued and building department issued with respect to a septic remediation in January 27th of this year. There was a tree removal permit for I think it was a weeping cherry on that side of the house, and a wetlands permit for a septic remediation. In early March, when I visited the property to inspect the ongoing septic work, and I think, yes, Ted Barnes was the contractor who was out there and actually doing his work. There were other activities going on at the site to separate, I'll say, on the other side of the driveway and continuing towards the stream. When I approached Mr. Barnes, he immediately alerted me, this has nothing to do with me. I said, okay, I just wanted to make sure. Took a quick look at his work and walked over, took some photos, didn't know what was going on. I phoned the building inspector to see if there were any permits, and he said no, and he came onto the site. And on that day, which I believe was March 5th, he came down and shut down the site for the first time. And we basically stated that other than to put in the additional erosion controls, which is silt fencing behind the hay bales, which they did install, that, you know, we didn't want to see any further work. We didn't want to see vehicles from Naranjo Landscaping at the site. Twice since then, once from Steve Davis. I don't remember the exact time. I know he had to take people or alert that people were to leave the site. Something to do, I know he mentioned there was a green pipe, which will probably come up later. Didn't know what that was for. And the second time, most recently in July, I guess Tom saw some people working over by the steps, and he also had to get people off the site. So as you could tell from the photos that I had sent, which were from March, and even to a point now, obviously this project, as they envision, has advanced to some degree. And that's kind of where we stand today, as they've submitted an application for completion of a design for various reasons. And I guess we move from that point forward.
Okay, this is Peter Kurth speaking. Thank you, Dennis, for your summary. After the project, the stop work order was issued, I believe on March 5th, the homeowner, Aaron Park, hired my firm to rectify the situation, prepare whatever drawings were required to submit to the town. This was, I think, late March, and the first submission we made, we did a field study of the wall, and we located that on a plan. and submitted it to the town. As a result of that initial submission, Mr. Corelli sent a very detailed memo dated April 27th, clearly stating what he expected of the homeowner and for the property, what measures had to be taken. First thing I did was to authorize a complete new survey topographic map of the entire property. That map, again, we requested things that reflected Mr. Corelli's memo. It was a topographic map, included contours, setback lines, the original septic location, the proposed septic, the present relocated septic situation. All existing trees of the entire property were located, and then as part of that process, hired Paul Janik to address all of the issues that related to the wetlands. So, he'll speak to those items. It is on our tree application, we acknowledge that a tree, 18-inch beech, was taken down without a permit. And you might say an overzealous landscaper did it. The homeowner asked the landscaper if a permit was necessary, and the landscaper said no. And that was obviously false. So in submitting the landscape, the application for the tree permit, we acknowledge the tree that was taken down. I'm not an expert, but it seems to be an 8-inch beech, 18-inch beech. It had moss over it, and it was a huge tree that was taken down. The application also plans on taking down an 8-inch weeping beech, and also to remove a Japanese maple. This is part of a master plan that we've created that we're planning to do some renovations and additions to the front of the house. And that's the reason that these trees were extremely close to the house. Mr. Parrick, maybe you could address the condition of the 8-inch beech, why that was taken down. That was before I came on board. But apparently it was not in good condition, and it overpowered the house and would have prevented any new improvements that we were contemplating on future renovations. The new survey also located more accurately the stone wall, and it is our objective to make good and do whatever the town recommends for remediation. The nature of the stone wall that is partially built is very close to the stream, and to move forward and to remove the stop work order, we would have to get this tree situation resolved with the application of the tree permit, and also a wetlands permit based upon the proximity of the work, which is all, by the way, in the front yard, including the trees and the partially built stone wall. I think the intent of the landscaper was to make the front yard more aesthetic, more usable, and more open, and more level. But perhaps Mr. Janik can talk about the wetlands items that were brought up in Mr. Corelli's memo.
Good evening. My name's Paul Janig, Wetlands Consultant. I was hired in May 19th. I delineated the wetlands on the site and prepared an accompanying report with a wetlands map and photos, and which you have. And subsequently, based on my work on the site and discussions with the property owner, developed a mitigation plan, which you also have, which outlines what we are proposing as compensatory mitigation for the work that's proposed. Just in general, the wetlands on the site are located primarily along a corridor where there's a small water course. It's flanked by about 20-foot wide swath of wetlands, which for the most part are poorly to absent in vegetation. And these all drain down back towards a pond that's adjacent to the residence. And that pond is clearly something that's it's man-made. They obviously, probably when they built the subdivision many moons ago, built it for two reasons. Ornamentally, it's an attractive feature, but also it functions as a retention area for stormwater. And I had on occasion went to the site following some rather large storm events, and it was very obvious that there's a boatload of water that comes flowing under Kitchel from the surrounding watershed, including residential neighborhoods and roadways, and basically down through the Aaron's property. And I would suspect that that pond many years ago was a lot deeper than it is now. I do not know how deep it was, but the property owner reported that people used to swim in it, and right now it's about 3 feet deep. And I would just guess, looking at the spillway, that it's substantially deeper than that, and it's silted up over the years. And I would say it functions as a catch basin. It's a sediment trap. And when the large storm events come down through the into Mr. Parrick's property, there's an awful lot of erosion, channel erosion, that occurs along the water course. And I suspect that was the motivation to build the wall, because part of the problem as far as erosion into the channel and wetlands is on site. I would say the vast majority of the damage that's done as far as erosive processes is off site and not under the control of the property owner. But on site, there is some erosion because to the east of the driveway where the stone wall is, the land very soon after leaving the driveway starts to slope off rather steeply, and quite steeply as you get down towards the water course. So overland runoff travels in that direction, and there is some evident channel and scouring along that slope, which is basically lawn. It's all scarified at this point, but it looks like it was all lawn to begin with. So I think what they were trying to do was build a wall that would attenuate the rate of runoff. And if you make a slope gentler than it currently is, you're going to slow the rate of runoff and therefore reduce the amount of erosion. And so I think that was the motivation there. There may have been aesthetic reasons, but just from my perspective, that's how I saw it. And with all that in mind, I decided to develop a mitigation plan that addressed two things: trying to create some type of a buffer between the proposed wall and the wetlands, and trying to do something about the erosion within the water course itself. And so I came up with a plan that showed between the stone wall and the wetlands edge, a planting scheme that included shrub understory and a herbaceous cover, native planting. So it basically be a no maintenance or low maintenance native landscape that would replace what originally was a lawn. There would be no change in grade from the stone wall down to the water course, but it would go well on the way to anchoring the ground cover along that strip. And then once you're in the wetland area, I've proposed beefing up, if you will, the vegetative cover along the wetlands that flank the brook. They're largely, again, unvegetated. And so I came up with a herbaceous cover that would be well suited for the conditions there, which vary from poorly drained to very poorly drained, and areas that perhaps would be subject to inundation during large storm events. And with that in mind, I thought it might be prudent to propose some, if you will, check dams, and that would be placing, traversing the channel, a series of small place stones, check dams that would slow down water, particularly during the larger storm events. I found evidence of such a quote check dam down towards the house. There's the remains of one, and there's more than likely there were others, but they're all over the years been ill-maintained or not maintained at all, and they're completely obscured. So that was my thoughts. In a perfect world, I'd even want to consider dredging out the pond, but that's another matter. And it may not even be possible with the amount of property that we have to work with. But it does act like a catch basin. And I might add that the spillway itself has a very small weir that overtops the current dam, and then the brook goes to the northern property line and then continues off into the woodlands. I did see in an old map Harold Campbell had prepared, probably when the house was built, there actually showed a little emergency spillway on the, it would be the western side of the dam, but it's been since obliterated by some previous property owners. So all the water basically goes over the 2.5 to 3 foot wide weir at the central line of the dam. The other thing that I thought would be part of our mitigation, I found that in doing my survey that the very northern portion of the property, which is lawn area, and I believe that's where the old septic system was behind the house. The property line, which is pretty much delineated by a split rail fence, there's an additional lawn area that extends north into another property. And that would be something that we would include also as mitigation. We would basically render that area fallow, and we would let it just nature take its course. So we'd return a lawn area to its natural condition over time. And we proposed a substantial amount in total between that lawn area restoring, the corridor along the water course, and the slope between the water course and the proposed wall, over, I believe it's about 3,600 square feet of mitigation. I think it comes to 3,450 square feet of mitigation. In a perfect world, I'd love to be able to do something up near Kitchel Road, but as you can see from the way the property is shaped, and if you didn't have a survey in front of you, you wouldn't think, but you would swear that Mr. Parrott actually owns that water course from Kitchel Road all the way up into his property, but there's a jog in the front property line there, and he doesn't own about 100 feet into his, what you think is his property. So the mitigation, as you can see on the map, is cut off right at the southeast corner of his property. So there's about 100 feet or so that goes from that point up to Kitchel Road. And as a matter of fact, there's another bit of pollution that comes in off of the roadway. There's an asphalt gutter that comes right near the driveway entrance, but it's actually picking up runoff from the road, and the gutter is directed right down slope, becomes a riprap gutter into the brook. So, you know, the brook gets an awful lot of outside sources of pollution. It gets some inside or within our property line points of pollution. But what we're trying to do here is to do what we can in our little world as far as improving and protecting a water course and a wetland. And if there's any questions you have with regards to specifics on the plan, I'd be happy to show you. But basically, what you have in front of you is a color-coded plan, and you look at the color, and you can go over to the plant list. You can see what the names are, the size, and the quantity. And then there's a detail of the proposed quote-unquote check dams that I have that would traverse the channel, and all the planting notes as far as how one would go about installing them are provided in the upper right-hand corner. There's a table of conditions. We would plant it at the appropriate times of year, and we would also make guarantees as to the longevity of those the stock that we put in. That map also shows the 100-foot setback line or buffer line. As you can clearly see, almost the entire property is within the wetland buffer. So there's little you could do on the property without having to apply for some type of a wetlands permit.
All right. I have one preliminary question. Has there been any kind of communication with the neighbor that controls the rest of the upstream portion of the brook?
Very good question. Aaron could actually answer that. Aaron?
So, yeah, the neighbor is on that side is, he's not, the way the property is that his house sits on top of the hill. There's a whole bunch of trees. And then you've got this steep hill that goes down. So from their house, they can't see it at all. And they really have no need or interest. I have talked to them about, because when it comes right under Kitchel, the water, when it comes raging, it's now digging at the tree line. So there's a couple of big trees that you can see the whole root system is exposed. And I tell them that I worry that it's going to fall down and knock my electricity down, but it's not really their concern. They did, however, give me a letter that says that I'm allowed to maintain their property so long as I say that it's their property and I'm not going to get eminent domain or whatever it is. So they do allow me to maintain it and deal with anything I need to deal with on it.
Adverse possession.
Yeah, something like that. He was quite nice about it. He said that his mom had some house and the neighbor was using it, and his mom passed away. He tried to sell it, and the neighbor said, "Oh, this is my property now." And he said, "Look, I've got nothing against you. You're doing a great job making your house look pretty, and we're really thankful for it. But can you just sign this letter, because someday I'll sell my house, and I don't want you to say you own the property," which I thought was nice and fair.
Right. But he's also not interested in putting any money into restoring the area of the brook that's on his property.
He said, "You go ahead and do it."
Yeah, that's human nature.
Right,
Yeah.
sure.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, but I mean, it's
Yeah, what's your front yard is is a forgotten corner of his property.
exactly.
Right.
But you have opportunity because he's allowing you to, to do other things that you might want to do. He could have said, stay off my property, and I don't care what happens to your stream or the pond at the end of this run. So there's, there's possible.
Question, when you started describing the project, you said there might be some additional work. This is part of a master plan of other.
Yeah, David, let me take you backwards because I think Peter was getting a little ahead of himself. But so this whole project just fell on me because our septic failed. And when our septic failed, we had hired some septic expert to take samples and go over everything. And he said, the only place you can put your septic is on this other side of your property. And where there was this tree that I liked this tree. So then while the septic was going on, the landscaper said, look, I can move that tree, no problem. You don't have to. The permit for the septic was cut down the tree. You don't have to do that. Go ahead and, cut down rather than cut down the tree, I can relocate it. And every year we fight with, what Paul was talking about, this erosion and all this other thing. And so the landscaper said, look, the best way to do this is to put a wall up and stop the erosion. It'll give you a place to put this tree. And let's carry on. So all of that happened, and then Dennis came and said, look, what are you doing here? You can't build a wall and do all this stuff without a permit, which I had no idea. I'm sorry, right? So I had no idea. So we hired Peter. And when we hired Peter came, he's an architect, and he's like, well, what are the things about your house you don't like? And I'm like, well, we've got this problem and that problem. And so now we're talking to Peter about trying to figure out a way to change our kitchen and do things like that. So Peter's got now a proposal that he's bringing to me and drawing about pushing the house forward a little bit so that we can get more space and we can push the kitchen back and we can make it more of a modern flowing house, because the house right now is a bit boxy. You come in and it's just not the way houses are made now. So that's what Peter was talking about. But right now, my focus is let's get this property. just get the rocks off the front of my lawn. If I could get the landscaper to just remove everything he did, that's what I would do, right? But now we are where we are. The wall is half built. Let's figure out how to deal with the erosion. And then when we finish with that, then deal with Peter about how do we change around our kitchen, put a deck in the back, things like that.
Well, I only raised that because of the location within the setback, and all the things you talked about would be impacted by your location. So things that need to happen now and then trying to come back later and change things around again might want to be thought of as one comprehensive solution, as opposed to being stuck with something later that is going to be a more difficult thing to do within the ordinance.
Right.
Second,
Because as Paul pointed out, basically the entire property is within the wetland buffer. So to the extent that that you and Peter agreed on changes to the house that would result in a change in footprint in terms of maybe an increase in square foot, you push out a wall or two or build a deck in the back. All of that would be taking place within the buffer, and in addition to whatever other permits you might need from other departments in the town would require another wetland permit.
Yes, I think the owner said it very clearly. We're making a master plan, or we're creating one now that might be implemented over time. And a lot of this homework we've done with the new surveys and topos and the wetlands analysis might be extremely helpful for a future application. But I think Mr. Parrick wants to get his front lawn back, and he wants to basically get the tree permit, get the wetland permit, and restore his property aesthetically in what was the original intent. So I don't think he wants to delay this for future work. Is that right?
That's one point, but the other point is Peter hasn't told me anything about what this could potentially cost. So I don't know if I want to spend a ton of money to move walls around in my house if that's what it costs. So I'm not prepared to say I'm expanding my house right now.
Right.
Understood, but we wouldn't want you to go through this process and then be surprised to hear, oh, the ability to build again within the wetland is going to be or the wetland buffer is going to be a permitted application, and you'd have to start this all over again.
Right.
So
Or-
just an
or-
FYI.
Right, I mean, even if it's, even if it's in a different place on the property, to the extent that there's a mitigation plan that's agreed to, that Paul has suggested, that everybody agrees to as part of this, it would certainly be probable that, depending on the nature of the additional impact from any later work, there would be additional mitigation required at that point. And, we just would want to make sure that you're aware that, whatever we decide with respect to the appropriate mitigation, the appropriate conditions on a permit here, would almost certainly be at least affected somehow, to the extent that you decided to do more work that amounts to additional disturbance in the buffer.
And from your, from your perspective, then, do you think it would be better if I included the more comprehensive plan that Peter's talking about? But how long, if I didn't want to do that plan, is that okay? Because I haven't decided if I want to spend this money. Peter's probably going to tell me it's going to be $300,000. He hasn't even talked about it, but I'm not spending $300,000, right? So.
Well, I mean, theoretically, you could put together a master plan if you had some kind of idea as to the kind of changes you would be doing to the structure, so that an overall mitigation plan for the entire project could be agreed upon, and go forward with the mitigation now. Then your only risk is if you decide not to go forward with the structural work or the work to the structure, then you may have done more mitigation than ends up being necessary because you decide not to move forward with phase 2.
What do you think, Peter?
Well, I think it's clear that you wanted to get this front yard taken care of, get the stop work order lifted, and focus on the tree permit, the wetlands permit for basically the front of the house. Again, the master plan is still being in the process of being designed and evolved. We decided that if the house needed a bigger footprint, it would be towards the front, because the back areas are somewhat restricted by angular setback line, and it seemed that the front of the house, if we bumped out the front of the house, it would give Mr. Parrick the additional space he needs. The front was a better option than pushing out the back. If you look at the survey, there's a triangular setback lines, and I don't think he wanted to impact that much on his rear lawn at this point.
My house gets a lot of foot traffic from the neighborhood because where we are, it's a walking loop. And I don't think there's a single passerby who doesn't stop to comment on how much better my front of my house looks than when I moved in. So I've been working hard to try to make it nice, but right now it's a pile of rocks and dirt. And I'd like to get it back to green grass.
Okay, I mean, so that's again, that's your option, and if you want to proceed at this point, with having us and Dennis, looking only at the application as it stands for this the existing disturbance, and that's fine. Just, again, forewarned is forearmed that.
Oh, that's quite helpful. I mean, I'll certainly counsel with Peter and Paul to see if what Peter was thinking about is going to cause us or need us to do anything else. But I'm fearful that the iterations of Peter coming up with his plan for the master plan is a multi-month process. It's already taken 2 months just to draw this plan. And so I'm fearful that it's going to be like September, October before we even get ready to do that.
Understood.
Just going to the mitigation plan.
Mhm.
Couple of questions. In the survey drawing, you show a rock wall continuing down closer to the foot of the driveway. The mitigation plan stops short of that. Is the intent to carry that stone wall farther down and
So,
deal with the mitigation associated with that?
Or is that existing?
no, there's no wall there. I could have a conversation with my neighbor. I think the original plan that wasn't written down, that the landscaper had, was to bring the wall all the way up, but the landscaper didn't know where my property line ended. And then when we hired Peter and Paul and they looked at the property line, they said, you can't make a proposal to the environmental review board for a structure that's not on your property. So we have to stop at your property line.
Yeah, drawing SP001 has a note, additional section of stone retaining wall to match existing.
Oh, the existing is what the, so there was a, let me just look at, I guess you have the site plan. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So near this flagstone patio, there's always been a stone wall that runs from the house to where the steps are. The plan was to extend that wall all the way to the front to help flatten it out. But there's always been a wall that's against the house and to where those steps under construction are.
Right.
That section was a wall that was there when I moved in. So the plan was to extend on the other, well, build the steps and extend the wall all the way.
Right. That's my question. The mitigation plan doesn't show this section of wall that is titled additional section of stone retaining wall to match existing. It doesn't show it on the mitigation plan, but shows it on the site plan.
Well, let's see now. No, I've got an additional section of wall there. I don't know where you're saying there isn't.
Yeah, on the site plan, the wall is proposed as it approaches Kitchel Road. It ends just about where the 9-inch crabapple was relocated from the septic system.
That's on the mitigation plan.
This section of wall here.
Well,
Yeah, that should be there. That's what's going to keep the soil from flowing.
oh,
Right. That's not on the mitigation plan, is what David's saying.
I see what you're saying. That map there, that's the site plan that you put up on the screen.
Right.
The wall that I had used came off of the survey that I had from Merritt's.
I'm just pointing out that the
No, I see
mitigation
just
plan
exactly what you're saying. That
doesn't
section
match
of that
the
section
site
of
plan.
wall is new to me.
Right. So that might require a little adjustment or to the proposed mitigation.
But this
My-
mitigation plan is, who drew this map, wetlands and soil, the park site? Was that you, Paul?
What do you,
It's like a, I don't know if you can see this. It is, you can't see this.
yeah, that's me.
That's you, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
on this page, there's a wall there. It's just running along the line. In fact, it goes beyond our property into the,
Well, yeah, but David just put up in front of the screen a map that shows another little, if you will, extension of the wall that goes closer to Kitchel.
okay?
It kind of jogs around the corner in the property line.
So,
Yeah.
Darren,
yeah,
can
so,
you see my screen?
yeah, so I will say that I was not privy to that map. I was privy to the survey that was prepared that showed the proposed wall. That's the merit survey, which you have?
Yes.
All right, so if you look at the wall section on the merit survey, that's the wall that I've used as proposed. So,
That's
I'd be
okay.
happy-
It'll
but
get flushed out in the process. I just wanted,
but yeah,
raise it.
that's perfectly fine and happy to make that amendment.
the second comment I have on the drawing is, and you touched upon it, that part of the mitigation being proposed is on your adjacent property.
But it's hands-off mitigation, if you will.
Whatever the mitigation is, my question is more internal. Can we accept mitigation on another property for an applicant?
Now, I don't think without having the adjacent property owner either become a co-applicant or somehow acknowledge and agree to be bound by the terms of the permit.
Deeded accordingly. So that was just my two comments on the
Yeah. Well,
plan. And-
you're quite right. If we were proposing plantings on a neighbor's property, we would clearly have to get their permission.
Well, even allowing an area to be naturalized is still part of your mitigation plan.
It
And
is.
in order to make that happen, you would need the adjacent property's approval, as John was talking about.
Well, and it's not only their approval, because, you know, you're obligated as, under the conditions of the permit, to maintain that mitigation, and there's no way legally that you know, suppose the property owner were to withdraw that letter that he gave Mr. Parrick tomorrow.
Mhm.
And yet Mr. Parrick was obligated under the terms of our permit to maintain that mitigation on the adjacent property. You know, we'd have a problem. So to the extent that anybody wants any mitigation, whether it's plantings, whether it's letting a lawn area go fallow, whether it's anything else that you want credit for in terms of the mitigation, we need to know that that's going to be subject to the continued compliance with the permit. And the only way we can do that is having the adjacent property owner
Okay.
involved somehow. And it would seem to me that if he was willing to give Mr. Parrick the letter that he did, and
I
Mr.
think,
Parrick,
Jonathan, that may be a different property.
Well, it's a different property owner, but I did
Is-
in the mitigation table.
Yeah,
I
the
did
person who gave, wait, John, just so you can, we were focused at the end of my property where the stream is there, but I don't own it. That's where you were talking about.
Yeah, the northern end of your property.
That's the one with the guy with the letter. And I think the part you were talking about is just behind the house where the post and rail fence is, where he
Correct.
was talking about it lay fallow. That's another guy's property.
That's another guy's property. But
okay, but no, whether it's, but you.
But your point is a good one, because the other guy didn't give me a letter, and I can't
Yeah.
maintain his property
You know,
without getting a letter.
Your point is all well taken. What I was trying to do there, my intent was and I understand exactly what you're getting at. It was just to correct a wrong that was going on out there. But having said that, though, I broke it down, and we can take that off the table if that's
I think we
problematic.
should. Yeah, I think we should. I don't want that.
That's
neighbor's
not a problem. I have on the mitigation, I have a table of areas, and I have it broken down, the lands to the north of our property, and then the mitigation that's on site. So we'll just take that off.
So
I think that makes sense.
to that point,
I would take off the part, the lawn area that I'm proposing to go fallow that's not ours.
Yeah.
We're not even going to discuss it.
so another question then is, as you go, I guess, up the brook, you have
Upstream or
upstream of the brook. Yes,
upstream? Okay.
from the
Towards
property
Kitchel.
line, from
Right.
your check dam,
Yes.
you have those greenish yellow lines coming up the sides. That kind of tie into a note that says proposed mitigation planting along brook.
Okay.
Let's see if I can point that out. So these areas here.
What I'm showing there is I'm just highlighting the wetlands boundary.
Okay. Because
And so I highlighted the wetlands boundary on the map with chartreuse, and I highlighted the water course with blue. That's
Okay.
all that is.
Okay.
Just so
so
they
the
see a
chartreuse
model.
is not part of the mitigation. for
No,
that.
sir. That's just to highlight those areas. And they're
Okay.
just a very, very slightly different shade.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's what was confusing me. That's the part of the mitigation I thought we were talking about, for which it might be covered by the letter from that neighbor.
What might be helpful to us is, or at least to me, is the chart you were referencing and where that chart applies to in the mitigation plan, just so we can kind of tick and tie the areas proposed and the mitigation quantity and material.
Okay.
All the other walls on the site plan itself, the merits drawing, all the other, where it says stone retaining walls, all the other hardscape elements, those are existing?
Yes, like the retaining walls to the east of the pond. Yeah, those have looked like they've been there for a dog's age.
Right. What might be helpful is just labeling them existing as opposed to the new. Because on the drawing list that I'm looking at, nothing is highlighted of exactly what, although we're talking about it, of exactly what the new wall scope is. So maybe either highlight that new section of wall that, however it extends down to the foot of the driveway, as saying this is the new wall, everything else is existing.
Okay.
Because at least by looking at the drawing, you can't really tell.
And at this point, David, you're talking about on the site plan or on the mitigation drawing?
On the site plan.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify exactly what the new wall is, the new steps, all of that. And Dennis,
That's
I guess
Peter's document, right?
What's that?
That's Peter's document, not Paul's.
Probably, yes.
Yes.
The merit survey.
Well, no.
Yeah, well, we can, what Merritt showed on the wall is the extent of the partially constructed wall. But it's true that some of that wall was existing, so we could easily indicate was the existing wall and versus the proposed wall.
Yeah, on your site plan, Peter, right?
Yeah.
On this SP 001.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to identify what exactly the work that's being proposed is.
Understood.
Then the area of impact of that wall, of that work, just so we can kind of play along with what the extent of the scope of the project is.
Understood.
Because of the height and size of the wall, does any of this need to go to the building engineer for review and approval? You got, up to 7 foot high wall.
That is a yes.
Okay. So that's outside of our purview, but might also create some impacts that you'd have to deal with as far as excavation, stockpile locations, and mitigation related to the work associated with excavating out footings, things like that, that should also be shown and accounted for in the mitigation plan.
Understood.
I think I ran out of stuff to pick on you about.
Yeah. Well, we could show the idea of the new lawn is to level out the grade, and that new grading would come to the top of the wall. So when we describe the proposed grades versus the existing topo versus the proposed topo, that would clarify the height of the wall at any given point.
Right. Which I'm sure, I'm just looking at the site survey. It shows the wall from 4 foot high to 6 foot high. The chart that says up to 7 foot high. So the impact of building that wall, the equipment needed, the footings, once it's engineered and reviewed, then the impact of those areas can be quantified.
Well, the way I understand it, there would be no more footings because the wall is started and it's about half built.
Well, it's boulder wall. I mean, I don't even getting out of my depth here, but the landscaper guy said that footings is something that, I don't know, is difficult to do or difficult to get permitted or something like that, and that the boulder wall is the right way to do this.
So
this is all I know.
So I would defer to Dennis and the town engineer to respond to your landscaper's comments about boulders and walls. I will tell you that a wall from 4 to 6 or 4 to 7 feet high should be looked at by a professional engineer, but the town engineer will give you guidance on that, not us.
I see.
But Peter, you're designing this wall, right? I mean, who's designing this wall?
Well, we've specified the completion of the wall that is basically started.
Right,
And
but I mean, who's going to tell the landscaper how to finish it? Like,
well,
according to
that will be on the grading plan, so he knows what height it.
Pardon me a second, but Dennis, just because the wall has started without permits, does that mean that the wall that has already been put up doesn't need to be reviewed by the town?
As far as we're concerned, we have existing conditions on the site, but none of it has been permitted. So from my perspective, from the perspective of the building inspector and from the perspective of the town engineer, just because something is started doesn't give permission.
So all we're trying to tell you, and that ties back to the first comments that we started talking about, was the overall project concept. You really want to think about what you're doing with these walls and possible foundation changes and all of that into a plan, just so you don't go down the road and have to either backtrack or be surprised later.
Well, does
that would be an unfair
does the
thing to worry
town,
about.
does the town want the base of the existing wall examined so that they can see or what the mason did with the wall that's half constructed? That would be a surgical thing that could be done in certain instances. So the building inspector or any other town engineer could evaluate the situation that's already built. I don't think there would be any need to tear down the wall and start all over again.
Well, let me just interject. You're assuming that the construction of a vertical wall for the purposes of concern over an eroding stream is the preferred alternative. And my interpretation of the wetlands application process is that we need to reach a decision, a consensus on the preferred alternative. And right now, since you've started this project, obviously that is your preferred alternative, but it doesn't necessarily automatically become the preferred alternative. So I think that, if I'm helping Mr. Horowitz, that's kind of what he's saying. You may have something that's in now that is perfectly structurally sound and is going to receive a PE stamp on a design, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we're looking for in terms of ameliorating all the conditions and issues that Mr. Janning included in his report and what I observed on site today.
So Dennis, based on the work and the observations and the review of the proposal and the back and forth on your original comments, do you have a sense between you and the engineer in the building department as to what you'd prefer to see or are happy with in terms of that partially constructed wall?
I think the concern is going to be, kind of where they stop now. There is still a general distance, I'll say, away from not only the wetlands, but, really where the stream runs. You're kind of more towards where you have the pond environment. But as the wall starts to get basically closer to the wetland line, the concern is that, we just have observations of events, storm events. There's no quantification, like what level are we designing this wall to? Is it a 1 in 5 year storm, 25-year storm, that type of situation? And the reason I bring that up is because, and as, Paul pointed out in his report, it's the opposite bank that to me has more potential to be an erosion issue. And if we put up a vertical wall on only one side, depending on what storm event that we're talking about, then I'm not confident that we're not just going to get another application a few years from now to do the same thing on the opposite bank, because the vertical wall, that verticality, I'm not comfortable with the attenuating word. I'm not an engineer, but it's more of a deflecting from the hydrodynamics that I have reviewed. Downward and sideways are the words that I had noticed. When we look at walls that are, this is not in stream, so I'm not going to go that far, but if you're concerned about flow and you're concerned about attenuation, there are sort of more angular approaches that we look at. I mean, the most extreme would be, sort of a riprap shoreline. I've also seen designs for an imbricated wall was the term, where it's almost like you're creating like this stepwise. But if you're just throwing up a vertical wall and, you've definitely cemented and pointed what's existing, if that's what's going across, I don't see how that's not going to potentially impact the other bank. And during certain events, I don't see how that maybe doesn't impact what I think is a very good mitigation plan from Mr. Janning, because you're not really attenuating, you're pushing all those forces potentially towards the opposite direction. So I think that, and that's going to be part of the review, at least from my experience with the town engineer, that it's going to look at the continuum of the system and not just the wall, because we are dealing with a stream, and he is responsible, obviously, stormwater, erosion, et cetera, in addition to the design of that wall. And because of that, the only part of the mitigation plan that gives me a little pause is I'm not a big fan of putting a bunch of check dams in the middle of the stream. I agree, the stormwater retention pond, that is your check dam. And at this point, we don't know what frequency those check dams would be designed to. So, you know, you have an existing stream, as you described. There is some erosion, but it's a bed. To me, it's a mix. There's boulder, there's cobble, there's leaf and woody litter, there's pockets of silty muck. I'm not necessarily behind putting in 3 check dams to change all those dynamics under normal conditions when I'm not sure what we're designing to in terms of storm, abnormal, those types of conditions.
Hey, Dennis, do you mind if I share my screen a second? Let me do that. This is a picture of what it looks like when we have a storm at my house. So can you see the picture? So this is the check dam you just talked about.
That's your dam, your spillway?
That's the pond, you call it, the dam, the spillway. That happens like, I don't know, every storm.
That's at the north end of the pond?
That is at the, I don't know, north and south. That's downstream. That's downstream.
The downstream, right. Okay.
Here's what happens to my driveway.
Wow.
Now is your driveway, that's coming off the road now?
That's coming off the road. You know, what happened was, and it got a lot worse in the last year and a half, Kitchel Road was repaved by the town, which has now made a really nice, like, stream in my house. This is just another picture of, this is the stuff that comes out of the woods. This is what, coming off of this is my telephone pole. So this is coming from my neighbor's house. Looks like. So, I mean, clearly this is a problem. I mean,
interest from me, though. I have competing interests, though, with respect to a vertical wall and check dams, and then not concern over the opposite bank. Like, I understand what you're trying to do, and I respect, you know, the collective of disciplines, but I still feel there's a disconnect, and that there is an element, and understandably so, of landscape influence, for lack of a better word, than honestly looking at the totality of the stream and a vertical wall on only one side, when it was identified that the concern for erosion is actually on the opposite side.
Right, so we're looking now at the stream, looking downstream. This direction is to the pond, is over here. This is the bank that you're talking about, which you can see is very eroded. This is the bank on my side. The wall would be way up here. It's a long way away from here. The water is not eroding this way. It's not eroding left at all. So the wall is not going to impact that. What the wall is going to do is stopping dirt from pouring into the stream, taking my front lawn into a deep slope, and then going down the stream into the pond and then overflowing into my backyard. But you're right, this whole property, and see this pink marker here? That's the end of my property. So that's the line that probably goes something like this. That stuff is on my property. All this barren stuff is the neighbor's property. But clearly it's a problem. We need to figure out how to fix it. And I'm not an expert. That's why I got Peter and Paul to tell me what to do. But we need to do something. This is.
Can I go to flag WFA6 if everybody has SP001 in front of them?
WFA6 SP001. What is that?
It's around spot elevation 320.02 in the stream.
Is that from the site plan or what's that from?
Yeah, it's the site
FP01.
plan.
The site plan, okay. And go to where?
Where the flag is labeled WFA6.
WFA6, got it.
Okay. So again, these are just spots. And as I think I started my conversation that, again, where the wall was initiated and where the steps are, I don't have the concern. But as we start to get closer to sort of what is the delineated wetland line, there's obviously the wall gets kind of closer and looks to overlap some of that contour 322. So again, during the events that you just pointed out, I don't know, would I be able to detect extra sediment or not extra sediment from going into your pond? I'm not sure. I believe if you wanted to, be concerned about that, as Paul pointed out, I don't know how much better a wall's going to do. Again, I'm not talking about the lawn. The wetlands require me to also look at the stream. So I'm looking at a condition whereby there's a potential for an increase in sedimentation within the corridor of the stream if a wall does get put in on a bank that is opposite what is already eroding. And so that's why I make mention of other alternatives whereby you're still putting in what would be considered a hard surface, a hardscape, for lack of a better word, cover to allay some of those concerns about the land eroding and runoff with respect to the stream, but at the same time not do any further impact within the corridor of the stream, because we now have a vertical wall in a portion that potentially could, receive contact with water based on the flow depicted in the photos that you showed us.
Well, if I may ask you, Dennis, are you implying that channeling the work with walls on both sides would be a better alternative? Because
absolutely not.
Okay.
What I'm looking to do is, if you're only going to focus on one side, I need to. And this isn't really avoidance of the three: avoidance, minimization, and mitigation. This is more the minimizing, and I'm trying to just minimize some of the potential effects of the hydrodynamics. And this is something that, again, I'm just mentioning it. This is going to be reviewed by others, within the building and engineering department, and that subject, has the chance of coming up again.
No, that's very helpful, Dennis. Appreciate that. I mean, I don't know anything about this. You obviously know a lot about it. So what are you recommending? And Paul, do you think it makes sense? Because we can redesign whatever you're recommending. I'm just looking to stop the problem. So if you know how to stop it, tell me how.
Wow, stop it. I don't know if I do know how to do that within stream corridors and wetlands, but what I know Paul had mentioned, again, you've obviously lost capacity during storm events as a result of where the bottom elevation of the pond is, I would imagine. So that's not going to help you upstream. But as far as concerns for, as we keep speaking about wetlands, downstream of the pond, obviously that weir that I saw today, that wooden outlet, obviously doesn't really mean much during the events that you just showed on the screen to the photograph of. So one of the ways to, I would say, mitigate that would be you have to increase the capacity or the retainage of the water. And really the only way that I could see that you would look to do that is with respect to returning the pond to whatever its design capacity was when it was constructed and left behind. I mean, I don't have anything on record off the top of my head that we ever received a permit to dredge the pond. I'm not sure how long you've lived at the residence, Mr. Perec, but I assume you haven't dredged the pond. So that to me, you know, I'm a little more amenable to that than sort of as we start to approach where the wetlands line is and where, you know, the, I'll say defined channel or the bank of the stream is. I would get concerned because of what you just showed me during, you know, storm flows. That you don't need that stream to suffer any more differential forces and other potential erosive.
Is there anything the town can do to help me? I mean, the stream goes under Kitchel and comes from town property in Whippoorwill Park. Can they help me put a dam further upstream that slows it?
Dams are not very popular in ecology. I'll just leave it at that. So it's
Or do
unlikely.
some, and maybe I'm using the wrong words, Dennis, but do some mitigating work so that the water from Whippoorwill Park, which I believe is town property, doesn't fall on my property. And the stuff coming from the road doesn't fall on my property. Is there something, again, I'm just asking here, because like I said, you all have a lot of experience, but what can I do as a homeowner to help keeping water from coming on my property in the first instance?
Not sure I have an answer for that. Water's going to go where it's going to go, I know is the simple answer.
I'd like to chime in here for a moment. If you had a chance to read my wetlands report, one of the things I discussed is the sources of runoff and possible pollutants that are carried in that runoff that come into the property. And, you know, if we had no rules, regulations, and an unlimited budget and no permits to apply for, the real solution lies upstream off of our property. That's the real best solution. All we're trying to do in this application is to work within the limits of our property. And we're quite limited as to what we can realistically do. We can't save the world, and we certainly can't save the watershed. But within the confines of our property, we're trying to do what we can with what we have to work with. So we do have a lot of constraints. I think the idea of putting the wall up, and I won't go into the details of the wall, but I think that wall as proposed is well outside of the channel of that water course. There's no evidence to suspect that it rises up to where that wall is proposed that I could see when I was out there. Have I been out there every day? No. Have I been out there in the largest storm events? No. But there's an awful lot of constrictions, and one of the big reducing factors is the size of the pipe that comes under Kitchel. That does limit the amount of water that can come through there. So the floodplain, if you will, of that water course through our client's property is rather narrow. And it's pretty much limited to the confines of where the wetlands are. So the low flow is the stream itself. During a large storm event, the floodplain extends up into where the wetlands limits are. So it doesn't extend upslope, if you will, towards the proposed wall. Now, could there be a storm that could come along, a 1,000-year storm event? Yeah. But by the way, when that happens, everything, all the roadway structures, all the drainage, all the quote unquote dams in the whole region will go into failure.
Let me ask you.
All I'm saying is that with what we're proposing has limits to it as far as mitigation goes. But I think it's realistic for what we have to work with. Now, can the wall be tweaked? I suspect that's something that could be worth looking into. But I don't buy into the fact that the putting up of that wall is going to exacerbate flow conditions in that stream. That just doesn't even make any sense to me. There's no elevation reason to suspect that.
Let me ask you a
And
question.
putting a
Paul.
wall on the other side of the stream is borderline ludicrous. So we wouldn't even go that way. The idea of that wall is clearly to take flow that goes from west to east. That is where the side where if you will, the septic's area is, that part of his property. There's overland flow that it's fairly level, but once you go on the east side of the driveway, it begins to develop slope. And there's enough slope there to develop enough runoff to cause gully erosion and scouring, which goes on right now. I could see it myself. So the intent of the wall is to make that area level so that that rate of runoff is dramatically reduced. And
Where's that runoff going to go now? I mean, the runoff, except for the wall itself, the ground is going to be pervious. It's going to be a yard area, so it's not, right,
not
but it
pavement.
seems like, but if it seems to me, and one of the questions I was going to ask is the pictures that Mr. Parrick showed us about what happens to his property in significant storm events.
Yeah.
All of that water that's inundating the driveway, looking like it's coming right up to the base of the house. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that flow is not coming from this stream, correct?
No, it didn't look like it from the photos. It looks like,
That's coming from more the western side of the
yeah,
property?
I would say
Okay,
either
so
off-site or on-site, yeah.
right. So if what you're proposing is to kind of level the area on the east side of the driveway to reduce the sheet flow, if you will.
The rate that it's flowing at, so it doesn't pick up steam. And once it picks up steam, it starts causing erosion. So I think that's the intent of the leveling off there.
So now it's gonna just pond in that area and not be able to.
I'll share another picture. Dennis had taken, thanks for taking these pictures, Dennis, but Dennis had taken these pictures. So this now is on the other side of the property. So that's the driveway over here. And this is the new septic system. This is what's collecting all the water that was coming from my neighbors. So all of that now is collecting and it's not getting in my driveway anymore. And that's on the site plan as well. If you look at
So
that's what's collecting. That's where that water's going, John. So it's going in there.
So it's not even making. So it's not even making it across the driveway anymore. You're saying.
That's right.
Okay, so there's less flow to worry about what's going to happen, what the effect of that wall is going to be.
That's right.
At the surface.
I understand.
Subsurface, that's all being piped and discharged directly to the stream now, down gradient from his septic. Part of the reason why I shared those photos and sort of had to speak to this, and that needs to be included in the plan when I discussed it with the building inspector.
So I saw that, and maybe we just go to your pictures again. This is included on the plan, you said.
The actual drain is, but the
This
piping
is not included on the plan, but if you were referencing this site plan, if you go to this rain inlet that's near the left-hand side, yard drain, rain inlet, RM 334.37, that's what we're looking at right now. So that is on the plan.
Right, I agree, the drain is, but you could see where the asphalt driveway was bifurcated with gravel, and that pipe now directly discharges.
Right,
to the
so,
stream. And
right,
since
so-
it's down gradient from the septic, we just want to include that on the plan and include that as part of the
So
design,
this is
'cause there's
also, you were
influence.
referencing this WFA6. So right next to WFA6 is a 4-inch PVC INB 322.07. That's what this
Right.
thing is. That's on the
That's
plan
right.
too.
The pipe I'm talking about is green.
Yeah, the one we're looking at right now.
Hmm.
That's on the plan.
So then there's another pipe in the area then that's not on the plan, because I took two.
So there's a bunch of pipes here. So you showed a picture of, because you wanted us to talk to this, so I want to make sure. This picture of this pipe. This
Right.
pipe is all the way down. It's been there forever, right? It was there when I
Okay.
moved in. And it's, so maybe you got to label it as existing, Peter.
Yeah.
But it's over there by WFA 10, WFA 11 probably is what you're talking about. This, because you see the wall and the steps is here, so this has been here forever.
Okay.
Right. And this one, I don't know which direction it goes. Your pictures. Sorry. And this one where you have the pond itself, these two, Peter, maybe you can put them as built, but I think what you're talking about is, sorry, trying to, there.
There you go.
You're talking about this pipe, probably?
Yeah,
And
and on
that,
the other side.
and the one on the other side, this one, these guys have been there forever too. That
Are
was
they-
whoever
Right.
put the pond in.
Are they
Whoever put the pond- I don't
downspouts?
even know where they, I think they probably, I have no idea where they come from.
Yeah.
I'm guessing maybe the gutters of my house.
That's what
but
it
I have
looks
no
like.
idea.
It almost
Leader
looks
drain.
like.
I just, for the purposes of when I'm walking out there with a plan and I'm seeing, some of the pipes in the area, I'm trying to figure out which is which and what is what. And so I know that based on the
Well,
numbers
maybe-
that I saw, they weren't included. So I wanted to just get clarity on that. And,
So maybe, Peter, what you need to do is come back and draw all, because there's got to be 30 pipes in the bank of the river that has been there forever. So,
And they're all existing pipes.
yeah, exactly.
So Dennis, you want those shown on the plan?
well, if you can clarify for me, you're saying that this 4-inch PVC, that is, I mean, this work was just done, right? I mean,
That's
this,
the green one, yeah. That's the green one that was redone.
Right.
Yep.
right. So then this needs to be part of the application. Because you put in a yard drain, again, down gradient from a septic system, and now are discharging that to the stream. I'm not commenting on it. I'm just saying it's not included.
Well, the septic system is this peat system, Dennis. It works different than the other one. There's 5 different peat bogs that
Yeah,
take
right.
it, and it's built up on a burn, and it's got some clay. It's a little too
Right,
technical
right.
for me, but it's got some clay wall around it and all the other stuff. And
Right, and I discussed that with the building inspector, but for consistency, we need to know where that drain is and where it is in relation to the up gradient septic system.
Well, we could do a field study of
yeah,
that.
you could do that. I'll show everyone so we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, Aaron, I could meet with you and maybe Miguel or whoever put the pipes in.
This
we-
is the
we
thing.
can get
The septic system ends. This light section is the end of the septic system, and there's like this clay. This whole thing is like some clay wall that water can't go through. I don't know what
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Right, and then this is way down here, a long way away.
Well, we could get the details of that from the septic plan that was prepared by the septic engineer. We can get that, a record of that.
Yeah.
You should, because the building inspector was curious, so I would want to include that.
Was
in the
that drain installed as part of the septic plan?
That drain was installed because after the septic went in, that whole area was flooding, like I showed you some
Yeah,
of those pictures.
yeah.
And the
Yeah.
landscaper was like, this is how we fix it. Otherwise, the water is going to
Okay.
show up on your septic, and you don't want that.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to keep water from the street off the septic as opposed to water from the septic.
Yeah.
It's not capturing that water.
I mean, it's painfully
Okay.
obvious just listening tonight that there's a lot of issues that occur off-site, and we have little, if any, control over those matters. So we're quite limited as to how we can address what we're trying to address.
Well, I think part of what the frustration though that Dennis is expressing is that the work that was already done may or may not have been fully and accurately presented in these plans. So
Yeah.
he's kind of a little bit of at a loss, just in terms of the information. So, I mean, it seems like at the very least, there's information that, that needs to be added to reflect the work, these existing pipes that predate, probably everybody on this call, and the pipes, drains, and other work that was installed by the landscaper in association with or following the replacement of the septic, so that the site plan is accurate and up to date and comprehensive. And that can be, and that has to be done. I guess that's just an exercise that's done, as part of together with the ongoing conversation. It seems to need to happen, not necessarily here at the level of this board, but at a more technical level with Mr. Parrick, your professionals, and Dennis, and the building department, and the town engineer, so that these plans, which I don't know that anybody has an issue with conceptually, but so that these plans can be tweaked and further developed to something that's going to make sense for everybody.
Okay, that makes
Well,
perfect
good.
sense.
I really appreciate all of the guidance you have all given me. You clearly are very experienced in this area. I'm obviously trying to do the right thing, Dennis. I hope you know that. I didn't draw on a piece of paper like the previous guy, a couple of round circles and bushes. I hired an architect, and I hired an environmental engineer and a wetland survey of my property. And you all just have to tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it, right? But I just don't know what to do, right? I've hired 2 experts. They brought me to this board. Dennis, you're clearly not happy. I don't know why, but what else I can do, please tell me.
I'm sympathizing with you, and I'm doing my best to try to speak for 3 heads that are going to review this and be prepared myself and or applicant to address when those questions come up. So to Mr. Janning's point, if there's comfort in that I'm looking at, a 2-dimensional drawing, excuse me, I know you got contours on there. I'm just focusing on the 2 dimensions where some of that, dashed line gets, I'll say, closer or proximal to the wall. And then I see the photos that you show me of that storm event. Someone, in addition to me, may ask the question, well, then what's going to happen to the other side of the stream in such an event when all that water is just banging into the wall on that side? I'm like, I did make mention of that. So
Dennis, doesn't it make sense possibly, rather than you having to carry the entire load for all of town hall, to get the other 2 representatives of the other 2 departments involved in the conversation at this point, so that everybody can put their heads together and look at the plan? Or is...
Yes, and obviously the application came in late last week, so not everybody's had that opportunity, but I did want to give the applicant the opportunity to at least present this to the board at the July meeting. So
Dennis, you've been extremely helpful in guiding us on what we need to do, and so that's fantastic. I just don't know where we go from here because we started talking about, lots of what sounds like a lot of additional work, and I don't know how long I'm going to have to keep living with mud in my front yard.
Dennis, would it be
Yeah.
useful if we had some cross sections made through the subject area?
Yeah, it'd be nice to show another dimension. Sure, that's a reasonable proposal.
Easily done.
And I think that would be beneficial to probably more than just myself, who I'm thinking of, that's going to obviously review the wall. I mean, I know after tonight, I am going to loop back with the building inspector and engineer because they're going to be curious, how the meeting went and what are some of the comments, and I'll bring those up and some of the things that we're going to have to include on the that was discussed tonight on the plan.
Yeah, I think I'd be certainly willing to meet with the building inspector, the town engineer. Coming back to something you mentioned earlier about the construction of the wall, the footing of the wall, maybe a specialized engineer could do a core sample or of the wall to see how it was built. I think that might make more sense to convince all of the officials that the wall that is currently started is sound, and when complete will be satisfactory to all town officials.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to happen for people to do that quote unquote sign off.
Yeah, because it sounds like, I could do a field walk with Mr. Parek and the landscaper who did some drainage, and I could put that all on an integrated plan. That seems to be what everybody wants. There may be existing pipes. No one really knows where they come from, but we do know where they empty out. And it seems like most of them go to the stream or the pond.
Right. We're just, again, not to reiterate, but the issue with that drain, it's just applying the rules and the laws as a blunt instrument with respect to where certain things can and can't go in relation to a septic field, which in this particular environment and summer of 2020, a lot of people are starting to, unfortunately, receive as a response as to why they can't get a pool, for example. So there's just, that was one of the examples that kind of, as the building inspector said to me, we need to know, where things are with respect to surface waters and flows and direction in relation to where a septic system is on the property. So.
Yeah, well, again, Dennis, it seems to me that at this point, you guys at Town Hall have to pretty much coordinate and let Mr. Parek and Peter and Paul, know which way they should be proceeding at this point, with the input from all three of you.
Extremely helpful, and that's what Mr. Parek was asking for. This is what we've done to date. If it's not sufficient, specifically, what do you want us to do to clarify these issues to the satisfaction of all of the town officials? But I think, as Paul said, we can't be responsible for off-site influences on the flow of water through his property.
Clearly.
And so we're trying to make do with what we have. And in that regard, I agree with Paul. I think the wall, and we'll make sure it's structurally sound, and the heights and the grades will take care of all of that. That'll be documented. But I think the concept that the wall it presents is a good one, functionally and aesthetically, for the front of Mr. Parrick's property.
Yeah. And from the point of view of this board and Dennis's jurisdiction as environmental coordinator, you know, we have to remember not to overblow this. The jurisdiction here basically relates to the fact that this structure was proposed to be built in the wetland buffer, and that we were concerned about impacts of that structure in and to the buffer. So, you know, to a certain extent, I think our inquiry is somewhat limited. The overall question is one that Dennis has to deal with in connection with the consultation with the building department and the town engineer, and some of the more general issues having to do with the stormwater flow, you know, is beyond the scope. I agree with you, Peter. It's well beyond the scope of this application, and frankly not within the jurisdiction of this board at this point. So
Well, thank you for that, John. Just so that clear, this environmental review board, if we make those few changes to the application we talked about, this is something that you think works for the environmental review board, provided it works for the rest of town?
well, I think that, from, you know, speaking for myself, you know, that at this point I would be prepared to let Dennis take the lead in coordination with the other town departments and come up with a plan that satisfies them at the staff level from the various viewpoints of concern that they all have, and then bring it back to us, you know, for kind of a stamp of approval. You know, with us looking at it through the lens and based on the jurisdiction that we have, you know, again, it's only the wetland permit that's the scope of our jurisdiction at this board.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Could I just ask one thing, Mr. Parekh? Would you mind emailing me a couple of the photos that you shared?
Sure.
Okay. You don't have to do it at this moment, but I will, you know, unless something like that was included in the application, that's something that may or may not be helpful when it gets, you know, onto the desk of the town engineer to review what they're looking at, and with respect to any comments he may have about stormwater, which is also under his jurisdiction.
Okay. Sound good, Peter?
Yeah.
Paul?
Hmm?
We clear? We know what we need to do? So Dennis, you're the point man, so let's keep communicating. Let us know what you need us to do next, and we'll do it.
Okay. I mean, you're definitely going to get individually from Bob his review and comments, and he'll CC myself and Tom, and I'll be speaking with Tom in the morning. And I guess we'll go from there, but there are some additions that are going to be made to the plan that were discussed tonight, and I could put those in an email so that we kind of have those additions documented and what we anticipate seeing moving forward, like Paul mentioning about some cross sections and maybe some additional information with respect to offsets of piping. I'm not looking for everyone under the sun, maybe just the ones that I photographed, because those are the ones that were most prominent to me, as well as some measurements from, you know, where the septic fields end and where your stormwater capture installation begins.
Okay.
Sounds
Got
like a
that?
plan.
Peter, you got that? So we're going to locate the existing pipes that came in Dennis's pictures
Yeah,
on the map.
I suggest they're in a meeting with you and Miguel in the field.
Okay, fine. And then Paul's going to help us with the cross section of the
Yes.
wall levels, I guess. And then we're going to measure the distance between the end of the septic and this stormwater capture place. And then Dennis, if you need us to do anything else, just let us know.
Yeah, like
Okay,
Dennis,
and-
if you could just follow up from this meeting, like you did in an earlier memo, this is where we're at, this is what we still need. It gives us a working plan to address. That would be to address your concerns as well as the town engineer, building inspector, etc. So it's all coordinated so that we can have a comprehensive plan that makes sense for everyone.
Okay. Again, you'll probably get something separate from Bob, but I will obviously be in the loop on that.
Sounds good.
All right.
And David, I really appreciate your comments. I think it was you, the pictures keep moving on the screen, but your comments about, think about the comprehensive plan, because I'm learning as I go along. This is a very involved thing. So if we've got lots of other stuff that we're thinking about doing, maybe we talk about all of that. Because I had no idea the septic had anything to do with the wall on the front wall to the drain, and they're all connected. So maybe it is a good idea to put it all together on a piece of paper.
Sounds good.
Glad to help.
Thank you.
Good. All right.
So,
Okay, thank you, everyone. It's very late, and thank you for staying so long. Hopefully we'll do all the things you asked us for, and
Thank
next time we
you,
can.
thank you for your guidance.
Appreciate
Have a
it.
good night.
Thanks.
Thanks
Okay.
all. Have a good night.
Take care.
I don't know how they, leave, or you can just leave, you just leave. Yeah, that's what you do. Well, normally the host shuts you off. But then you go to.
John, we're starting to run into my bedtime.
Yeah, me too. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm only allowed to end it. I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to throw people off.
All right. Well, those were two unique applications.
Yeah, good meeting.
All right. Well, Dennis, I hope we gave you a little bit of help on Parrick. You know, I think it's a complicated situation that's largely not of his making, but so you'll get together, you'll talk to the engineer and Bob, and you know, I mean, to the extent that you can encourage them to do something so that you get one set of feedback to these guys, it might be helpful. I understand you're saying that Bob's going to issue his own comments, but you know, the more coordinated it could be, I think probably the better it would be for everybody.
Sure.
So, and on the other one, on Hardscrabble Road, you'll circulate an email and see what makes sense. I don't know. We used to, Dennis, before you got here, when we did summer site visits and everybody was going to offices in the city, we used to do them at say 6 o'clock. But I don't know, Ivan and David, whether you're constrained by that at this point.
No,
what your
I'm
schedule-
far more flexible these days. So.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I can be flexible. It has to be during the week for me, though. I'm not around on the weekends.
No, I know that, but I mean, but, you know, if we could do one, you know, if we could do it a weekday morning, does that work for you? Or are you tied up on calls and meetings all the time, or what?
Afternoons is still better for me. If we could maybe 5 o'clock, but
Okay,
Okay.
all right, Dennis, why don't you circulate something, see whether we can come up with a couple of dates around 5 o'clock in the afternoon that might work to go over to the Hardscrabble Road, and then I'll leave it to you. You know, we had a couple of these contentious things where neighbors were involved, where Steve tried to be pretty diplomatic and invited the neighbor along on the, no?
Were those other tree removal applications, or were those for wetlands?
No, they were tree removals, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
But maybe it's best just for us to go. At least get a sense of the how it lays out. But so if you do that, you know, and see what works, obviously what'll be convenient for the, you know, for the property owner too.
John, if we're going to see one, does it make sense to see both properties?
Is there anything that
Yeah.
you feel you need to see on the other property, on the Parrot property? I feel like
Yeah, I don't.
I feel like it was pretty well covered by all of the drawings and photos.
I just, the idea of this wall seems to me more of a landscaping issue than anything to do with water or flood mitigation.
No, they
If
want
the
he
road
wants a
is coming
level,
up as
he wants a level
driveway
lawn.
to the house, putting the wall up will do absolutely nothing. This is to get a level lawn.
Right.
Has nothing to do with stormwater and stream management.
No.
And I was curious to see what that embankment actually looks like, as opposed to, you know what, doing something like riprap embankment, landscape the buffer, and that's what you should do. Putting a 7-foot wall, a couple of 100 feet, is a major undertaking.
And it's not, as you say, David, it's not going to do anything to stabilize the stream.
It has nothing to do with the stream.
Right.
And if anything, you're going to end up with a waterfall from the lawn going over the rock wall into the stream. And that water now flowing over the wall down is just going to undercut the base of the wall and erode that couple of feet of stream corridor that's existing. So, Dennis, I'm kind of with you. I think it's going to do more harm than good.
And it's funny because then the stream flow would actually, through adhesive, right, cohesive forces, then hook up with the flow that's coming in the stream. So now technically you would have the water coming in contact with the wall, not being able to determine origin, whether it be overflowing from the lawn or coming through the culvert under Kitchel. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I, you know, the design of the wall aside, I'm not sure that any of this is a stream issue, and it's just getting a flat front yard. Anyway, my comment.
All right. Well, Ivan, I was just surprised that when we started talking about weirs, that given your experience, you didn't pipe up immediately.
It was my inability to retain consciousness that I think got in the way.
All right. Well, so Dennis will circulate the emails about at least going over to Hardscrabble Road. So, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn for the night.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.